After spending a few weeks with the Playdate, I am happy to say it is a delight. Okay, its boutique approach to lo-fi indie gaming is, at its most superficial level, kind of pretentious, but it's so damn charming. I couldn't help but let it into my heart. It's not without its shortcomings, but the Playdate succeeds in its mission as a quirky platform for some truly weird little games. It's charming rather than try-hard, and I like it a lot. First and foremost, let's talk about the crank. Folded partway inside of the case of the Playdate is one of its defining features. A little crank like you might find on a Jack-in-the-Box. It spins with little resistance in either direction and is wholly optional when it comes to games. But it is there, tempting developers to make use of it. And they do. A lot. For instance, one of my favorite Playdate games is Whitewater Wipeout. It takes some getting used to, sure, but once I was able to get it down, I was pulling off sick quadruple spins over massive monochrome waves. It feels so fun and is a great use of the crank as a controller in a way I wouldn't even have considered. Crankin's Time Travel Adventure is a more straightforward use of Playdate's novel control input, where you use the crank to control the flow of time. While it seems like a pretty obvious use of the crank, it's clever in how clearing a level requires quick thinking and adjustment to your rotations, both in speed and direction. Outside of the crank, the Playdate itself is quite a minimalist gaming handheld. The yellow plastic case is almost a perfect square, measuring 76 by 74 by 9 millimeters. The corners are rounded, and there are attractive brushed metal screws holding it together. The screws themselves have a hole through the middle, so if you really wanted to, you could attach your Playdate to that boondoggle keychain you made at Scout Camp. On the face are a familiar set of controls, a lovely D-pad, and a modest pair of buttons. It's similar to the original Nintendo Game Boy, with slightly different layout. The best part here is the D-pad. It is so clicky in every direction. The A and B buttons have a similarly satisfying tactile feel to them. There's also an accelerometer inside, but few games take advantage of it, so a lot of people probably won't even realize it exists, at least not at first. Above the controls is the Playdate's back to basics 400 by 240 monochrome screen. It's small, around 70 millimeters wide, not including the bezel. Man, is it crisp. Motion is very fluid, and there are no issues with ghosting, even in fast-paced games like Whitewater Wipeout or Hypermeteor. The viewing angle is fine, but to get the perfect contrast, you really have to look straight on, which can be a problem if there's a light source reflecting off the screen. Also, there's no backlight, which is a double bummer because it means you need ambient light, and again, you need to make sure that light source isn't reflecting off the screen. That puts some limits on where and when you can comfortably play. On the right side of the display is the menu button and the Playdate's tiny little speaker, which puts out pretty decent sound considering its diminutive size. Given the retro screen, I was a bit surprised that there's no hardware limitation holding back the sound. Chiptunes are a design choice for some of the games, but others, like Pick Pack Pup, use actual music tracks. During the Pick Pack Pup tutorial, I instantly recognized Holmes' If I'm Wrong from their 2014 album Before the Night. Needless to say, that one gets bonus points with me for using music for one of my favorite Vaporwave artists. I like Vaporwave, who could have guessed? The 168 megahertz processor inside is 40 times faster than the one inside the original Game Boy, and its rechargeable battery gives you an advertised 8 hours of continuous gameplay. It's hard to get an exact measure, but I was able to play in couple of hour increments during the course of several days before I needed to charge it up again. And if I had to guess, it came pretty damn close. I never had any sort of battery anxiety. Even with its modern hardware touches, it's a far cry from the power of even a budget smartphone. Because of this, game designers have to work with and around its limitations, and I absolutely love the results. There are no 3D graphics here, just hand-drawn art that evokes a much simpler time in gaming. My biggest complaint with the design is it's kind of hard to hold with my hands, and if I play a lot of a game like Whitewater Wipeout, which, quick reminder, is my favorite Playdate game thus far, my left hand begins to hurt. My fingers start to cramp in a way I haven't experienced since marathon Halo sessions on the original Xbox controller. One of the Playdate's features, or gimmicks depending on your level of cynicism, is its game delivery system. When you buy one for $179 US, you're not just buying the hardware, you're buying a steady stream of content too. And it doesn't matter when you first connect your Playdate to Wi-Fi either. If you get one a year from now, you'll still get the surprise of a new pair of games each week for 12 weeks for Season 1. Right now, there aren't any details about Season 2, like if it will cost extra or even if it will happen at all. The games themselves are tiny by modern standards, mostly measured in tens of megabytes rather than the 100 gig behemoths we've grown accustomed to. The biggest game delivered during the review period weighs in at 158.7 megabytes. The smallest? That would be a featherlight 59.4 kilobytes. So while the Playdate's 3.4 gigabytes of usable space sounds minuscule relative to even the Nintendo Switch's 32 gigabytes of internal storage, in practice there is plenty of room for potentially hundreds of these little games. Note, it is a single-use device though, so you can't use any of that space for music or podcasts. As someone who's been feeling oddly nostalgic for the days of hardware limitations and how they color design, the Playdate's lineup hits me right in the old man feels. The 1-bit graphics on games like Casual Birder or Echoic Memory remind me a lot of the HyperCard games I used to play and write back on the old school Macintosh. So much dithering. These aren't modern games designed to look like old games. These are modern games designed for hardware that accentuates that old school charm. That is a very good thing. Another major feature of the Playdate is the relative ease at which you can create your own games. There's a full-featured SDK you can download right now on the Playdate's official website, and if you know C or Lua, you can start building games right away. If you're like me, you know neither C nor Lua, but there's a web-based game development tool, so those of us without the requisite knowledge can still try their hands at building games. I've recently been revisiting the type-in basic games from my youth, and the idea I could start building my own original games without having to type in line after line of code that's really pretty thrilling if I'm being honest. I am very excited to see what people create both in the SDK and in the web tool. The Playdate is for a very specific, very specialized audience, of which I was surprised to find myself a member. I was unable to resist the pure lo-fi charm of it. And while the Season 1 games don't all hit for me, the joy of trying out a steady flow of new, interesting, inventive games held my interest even for the ones I wasn't too keen on. The crank is a gimmick, okay? But the way certain game designers cleverly implemented it is really fun, and I'm interested to see what uses come of it in future games. That being said, ergonomically, definitely a bummer to use for some of the more crank-intensive games, and the screen's lack of a backlight can be a frustrating limitation, but you know what? Playdate charmed me, and now I am fully under its spell. For more handheld gaming, check out our review of the Steam Deck. For everything else, keep it right here on IGN.